And just very quickly, folks, I want to let you know that we're going to be a few minutes late, so you can just kind of relax or go grab a coffee if you got to, but not too long, probably 5-10 minutes. We're just waiting on the ranking member. All right, good morning, folks. The committee will come to order. And I'm going to start right off this morning by saying that I woke up bright and early this morning and hopped on some radio shows back home, and the ranking member, Pete Stauber, came up as an example of someone said, geez, do you enjoy working with any of your Republican colleagues? I said, well, sure, this is an easy one. Pete Stauber from Minnesota is a great guy. But the last time that I was late to committee, he texted me and said that I owed him a beer for like every minute I was late. So I'd say we're even now. Oh, boy. So I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning, and I especially thank the witnesses for being here, and thank you for your patience. And supporting small businesses can take on many forms, from making sure they have affordable access to capital, something we talk about a lot here, to making sure our nation has an up-to-date infrastructure, to meeting the technology and transportation needs of small businesses. Another way that we support small businesses is to simplify and expand opportunities to do business with the United States government. The federal government is the largest procurer of goods and services in the world, spending nearly $442 billion in fiscal year 2017, for example. Over the years, Congress has recognized the positive impact that federal contracting has on increasing small business development and growth when it established a minimum for a federal contract set-aside of 23%. As a subset of this overall goal, agencies aim to maximize participation of small businesses in the federal marketplace for certain deserving demographics. The Small Business Act sets the goal of awarding 5% of all eligible prime contracting and subcontracting dollars to small disadvantaged businesses and women-owned businesses, and 3% for HUBZone and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. Last year, the federal government awarded $120 billion It's about 25% of all eligible prime contracting dollars to small businesses, and met goals for the small disadvantaged businesses, the disabled veteran zone businesses, respectively, as well. And this is certainly moving in the right direction. The prime contracting goals for hub zone small businesses and women-owned small businesses, however, were not met. While it's true that small businesses received more dollars this year than years past, dollars to large businesses are actually increasing at a faster pace, and the disparity is quite large. And unfortunately, a closer look at the numbers reveals that most of the eligible contracting dollars were given to just a few very large companies in the country, which is not an acceptable outcome. And I think that this point is important because we all know that everywhere we go in the country, small businesses are the largest job creators and providers out there, and that's particularly true in districts like Ranking Member and my own, which are very, very rural. So I think it's important that we stay focused on using taxpayer dollars, federal contracting opportunities to the benefit of small businesses. As the chair of the subcommittee on contracting and infrastructure, I'm committed to furthering small business interests and improving our small businesses contracting framework to ensure that small businesses around the country can compete and thrive. And that's precisely the purpose of our hearing today, to listen to some of the challenges that small businesses face in the federal marketplace and potential solutions we can look to as policymakers to address them. As part of today's hearing, we will hear directly from small contractors about how certain Section 809 proposals that use words like streamline and efficiency can sometimes be code words that could potentially eliminate most small business set-asides for Defense Department acquisitions. These recommendations would replace the long-standing 23% set-aside with a minuscule 5% small business preference. The subcommittee also wants to hear how we can improve the Small Business Act to remove barriers for entry, increase the use of subcontractors, and make sure that small firms are paid in a timely manner when providing quality goods and services to the federal government. That's something I hear about repeatedly back home from people contracting with the government. Timeliness of payment is a barrier to participation. With that, I want to thank all the witnesses for their attendance, and I look forward to your testimony. I'd now like to yield to the ranking member, Mr. Stauber, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Golden. You know, the federal government has long stood by the policy that government should aid, counsel, assist, and protect the interests of small businesses' concerns in order to maintain the strength and overall economy of our nation. One of the primary tenets of the Small Business Act is in recognizing the use of small business contractors as in the interest of maintaining or mobilizing the nation's full productive capacity, in the interest of war or national defense programs. To this end, it is my privilege and honor to sit on this subcommittee to ensure that the people's will is met and to provide a platform for small contractors to freely voice their issues and concerns. One of the issues that raises the most alarm bells are the small business contracting and subcontracting. Subcontracting is vitally important to the health and vitality of a small business, particularly those that are new to the federal marketplace. Subcontracting opportunities are most often the first and best way for a new small business to engage with the federal customer, and small firms structure their entire business model entirely around obtaining subcontracts. Therefore, it is imperative that maximum effort is made to ensure subcontracting opportunities are plentiful and fair. Like the federal government, large contractors are required to develop subcontracting plans and meet goals for partnering with small businesses. Unfortunately, as we've seen previously in this committee, agencies are not doing enough to ensure large primes are following through on meeting their subcontracting plans, and the rules themselves surrounding subcontracting plans might be part of the problem. I look forward to hearing more about the issues surrounding subcontracting plans and ways we might be able to hold large contractors accountable. Another concern brought to this committee's attention are some of the recommendations made by the Section 809 panel, a group established by Congress to address issues with the way the Department of Defense buys what it needs. One of the recommendations raising red flags among the small business community is the proposal to replace the small business set-aside requirement for certain contracts with a 5% price preference. The set-aside requirement is critically important in that it provides a protected pool in which small and new vendors can compete, develop, and grow eventually to compete for larger acquisitions against bigger companies. Thus, it's important that we maintain this special requirement in the interest of having robust competition and ensuring a healthy defense industrial base. There are other troubling recommendations coming from the panel's report, such as eliminating the multiple form protestability and restricting the SBA's, quote, once 8A, always 8A rule. I hope to learn more from our witnesses about what impact these recommendations might have on small businesses serving in the defense marketplace. Lastly, one of the industries in which small businesses make up a majority is construction. The federal government depends on small construction companies, whether they are primes, subcontractors, or suppliers. Every government building, VA hospital, and other structure important to the functioning of our government needs these small construction firms to succeed, so we need to make sure their concerns are heard and addressed. Obtaining and maintaining steady cash flow is one of those issues particularly important to a small construction contractor, and I hope to learn more about this and other issues from our witnesses today. Thank you all for your testimonies, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Stauber. The gentleman yields back. If we have other committee members, well, for committee members, we have that have opening statements that they've prepared. They can submit those for the record. And I'd like to take just a few minutes to explain the timing rules for those of you testifying. You may have been through this before, but just in case, each witness gets 5 minutes to testify, and each member gets 5 minutes for questioning. There's a lighting system in front of you that will assist you, and the green light will be on when you begin. Yellow light tells you got a minute to go. And the red light will come on when you're out of time. Just do your best to try and stay within that time limit. And I'd now like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Ms. Belinda Guadarrama, the founder and CEO of GC Micro, a leading supplier of computer hardware and software products and integrated systems to the defense and aerospace industries, federal agencies, and Fortune 1000 companies. She's co-chair of the GovEvolve Advocacy Organization and has served as chair of the NASA Minority Business Resource Advisory Committee and as a member of the Department of Energy Task Force on Small Business Development. Among her many accomplishments, she received the National Minority Female Entrepreneur of the Year award from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the Latino Entrepreneur of the Year by the Latino Business Association. Welcome, Ms. Guadarrama. Our second witness is Mr. Bruce Lansdowne, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Trinity Technology Partners Incorporated, a small business that participates in the 8A program. Mr. Lansdowne is a business and program management executive with more than 20 years of leadership experience and has served as an executive advisor to the Air Force leadership. He serves on the board of directors for the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce and Donations, the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce and Donations from the Heart Incorporated, a faith-based nonprofit organization developed to serve both individuals and families by providing assistance and resources for those in need. Welcome, Mr. Lansdowne. Our third witness today is Mr. Thomas DePace. Mr. DePace is the CEO and Senior Engineering Manager of Advanced Sound Company, a small business dedicated to audio, visual, and security installations. In this role, he has expanded the core competencies of Advanced Sound Company from audio-visual systems to include network infrastructure, lighting control and automation, as well as access control and intellectual property security systems. In 2010, Thomas was a 30 Under 30 Young Professionals Award recipient from the Huntington Chamber of Commerce, and in 2015 he was recognized as a Commercial Integrator 40 Under 40 Award recipient. I got a 40 Under 40 back home in Maine as well. Welcome, Mr. DePace. And I would now like to go ahead and yield to our ranking member, Mr. Stauber, to introduce our final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And our final witness is Ms. Dorothy Callahan. She has been a small business advocate for the past 30 years and has extensive experience in acquisition, contract management, and supplier diversity, supporting both the private sector and our federal government. Ms. Callahan is a seasoned veteran in managing multiple subcontractors and partners for large and mid-scale procurements and has a long history working with the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Defense acquisition regulations SBA size standards and regulations, and a variety of other federal, state, and local procurement regulations. Ms. Callahan worked for the National Government Services Business Development Organization from 2011 to 2019 as the Small Business and Strategic Partnering Director, and in that role, she developed and enabled small business utilization strategies for the business development, capture, and program teams. She also worked diligently to identify small business partners for NGS. Prior to that, Ms. Callahan was the Small Business Liaison Officer for IBM's U.S. Federal Global Business Services Division. In her time with IBM, which spanned over 25 years, she was involved in contracts, administration, management, sourcing strategy, subcontracts management, and bid and proposal support. Ms. Callahan is an active member of many government and non-government procurement organizations, having attended as a guest speaker or panelist for several small business events. She clearly brings us a wide depth and breadth of experience, and I look forward to hearing your testimony. Ms. Callahan, welcome. Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
And now we'll move ahead. Go ahead and move ahead to our witness testimony. Ms. Guadarrama, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Golden, Ranking Member Staber, and members of the subcommittee, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Belinda Guadarrama, and I'm the founder and CEO of GC Micro Corporation, a minority woman-owned information technology business located in Petaluma, California. I'm testifying on behalf of GovEvolve, a group of small and mid-sized IT VARs, firms that enhance the value of third-party products and play a vital role in the IT industry, providing software, hardware, and networking products that provide value beyond just order fulfillment. GovEvolve members represent WOSB and EDWOSBs, HubZone certified, 8A, service-disabled veterans, small and mid-sized businesses. I founded GC Micro in 1986, and my vision extended far beyond my desire for personal success. I envisioned a company where my staff is not just employees, but they're my business partners. This community-minded philosophy has been the undercurrent of my leadership since GC Micro's founding. My experience in government, including as a White House Small Business Policy Advisor, allowed me to see firsthand the importance of having effective small business policies that promote growth and innovation in our nation's industrial base. I would like to highlight some of the challenges faced by small and mid-sized companies in the federal marketplace, as well as provide opportunities for change in acquisition policy for IT VARs and the entire small business community at large. First, as this committee is well aware, the Section 809 panel recommended eliminating small business set-asides in exchange for a 5% price preference at the Department of Defense. Small businesses have everything to lose with this change. We strongly encourage the committee to support the more than 51,000 small business contractors that service DoD's mission by preserving the contracting programs that fulfill the nation's policies of ensuring a healthy industrial base. Second, as government contracts become larger, a small business has to decide whether to grow to compete with large companies, sell the business, or stay small to avoid the difficulties of competing in a full and open environment. While the Small Business Runway Extension Act made an important change for revenue-based size standards, we urge the committee to adopt a 3-year average for employee-based NAICS codes to give these small businesses much-needed time to transition into full and open competition. Third, size standards play an important part in government contracting, defining eligibility for small business programs. There is not an NCIS code specific to IT resale or to IT VAR functions. Product provided under IT VARs are listed as a sub-industry or exception in footnote 18 under NAICS code 541519. To alleviate this confusion, GovEvolve is recommending the creation of separate IT VAR IT NAICS code maintaining the 150 employee size standard. Fourth, as government buying continues its trend toward large vehicles, it's increasingly challenging for small businesses to win sole source awards. GovEvolve supports H.R. 90, which eliminates option years for sole source contracts. We also urge you to consider increasing the sole source threshold to $8 million and $10 million, as expected to be proposed in the Senate. Equally important is streamlining and simplifying rules for awarding these contracts. We recommend the committee remove the requirement that a contracting officer must show they do not have a reasonable expectation that offers would be received from 2 or more small business concerns. Fifth, the goal of the FAR Council is to assist in the direction and coordination of government-wide procurement policy and regulatory activities. But discrepancies between the SBA and the FAR create headaches for businesses and the acquisition workforce. We strongly recommend adding the SBA to the FAR Council to mitigate these issues and give small businesses a stronger voice. Finally, GovEvolve understands the role of subcontracting as an entry point for small businesses to enter the federal marketplace and build past performance. GovEvolve encourages the committee to look at incentives that would spur subcontracting plan compliance and small business utilization. In conclusion, IT VAR companies like mine have unique challenges outlined in this testimony. We urge the committee to take bold steps to strengthen small business programs and fully integrate these programs into the government's buying strategies. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. And now, Mr. Lansdowne, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Golden, our Ranking Member Stauber, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Bruce Lansdowne. I'm President and CEO of Trinity Technology Partners. My company develops and offers information technology services and solutions, and we're located in Greenbelt, Maryland. I'm here today to testify on behalf of Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, of which I am a board member. MCCC is a 500-member organization located in Montgomery County that works to move the needle on policies that positively impact small and mid-sized businesses in the federal marketplace. Thank you for inviting me here today on this very important segment of our economy. Trinity is a small business currently providing support to the federal marketplace. However, after I started the business, it was challenging to obtain opportunities to participate in the federal space. I was fortunate enough to use a professional relationship that I had previously established with a large company in order to gain access to the federal market as a subcontractor. We took this opportunity very seriously, and as a result, we began to receive many accolades from the government customer. Despite our successes, though, as subcontractor and providing our capabilities, it was still a 5-year journey to receive a prime contract with that particular agency. This story is not just unique to my company. It highlights the time and effort put in by small businesses to compete in the federal space. However, I took each challenge as an opportunity to make things better, not just for my company, but for the government customers and all mid-sized small government contractors. It is with this passion for success that I joined the Chamber's Board of Directors. The Chamber has been at the forefront of finding solutions to tackle problems in the federal market space that exist around subcontracting. As background, an important part of the Chamber is its GovConNet Council, which is comprised of industry procurement experts and practitioners. The council meets monthly to discuss federal contracting issues that affect small and mid-sized firms. Large companies are also an important part of the Chamber and membership, and they support efforts to assist small and mid-sized companies to obtain success in federal contracting. Last year, the GovConNet Council identified an issue that continues to be problematic for small and prime contractors alike, subcontracting. The council then decided to convene 4 stakeholder roundtables with industry, including large prime contractors and small subcontractors and government officials, to identify pain points in subcontracting for all sides of the equation. We enlisted the help of Bloomberg government to identify what data exists on subcontracting, its accuracy, and its purpose. According to Bloomberg, prime spending on contracts requiring subcontracts is surging, Prime contracts requiring a subcontract plan now total $302 billion, which is 54% of all FY 2018 spending. Furthermore, our prime contract spending on these contracts has grown 73% since FY 2014, a huge uptick that indicated we're on the right track. Through those roundtables, the council identified recommendations that are a result of extensive discussions and consultations with members and policymakers. Our goal is to improve accountability and transparency in subcontracting for small businesses. The Chamber makes the following recommendations. Number one, empower the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, OSDBUS, to monitor and improve subcontracting compliance. Maintain and enhance data collected through the Federal Subcontracting Reporting System, FSRS. Require the SBA to report subcontracting dollars on their annual scorecard, not just percentages. Number four, direct GAO to conduct a study of subcontracting authority, processes, systems, and reporting of subcontracting performance against established goals. And lastly, improve utilization of small business contracting through programs through expansion of sole source authority. In conclusion, we would like to thank this subcommittee for its continued efforts to improve federal contracting access for small and mid-sized businesses. The Chamber will continue to work with this committee to strengthen the role of these businesses in the federal marketplace. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And Mr. DePace, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Golden, Ranking Member Stauber, and members of the subcommittee for inviting me to testify today. On behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association, or NECA, we greatly appreciate the opportunity to submit a statement for the record to the Subcommittee on Contracting and Infrastructure. The subcommittee should be commended for holding this important hearing to better understand the issues facing contractors in the federal marketplace and the ways in which simple solutions can bring about great change for their small businesses. My name is Thomas DePace, and I am the Chief Operating Officer of Advanced Sound Company in Farmingdale, New York. My mother and father bought this company in 1988 and have worked for over 3 decades to transform our family-owned business into an industry leader. Partnering with over 80 manufacturers in the industry, Advanced Sound Company has become a premier distributor and integrator of quality audiovisual equipment and solutions. After joining the company in 2007, I've worked to expand the core competencies of Advanced Sound from audiovisual systems to include network infrastructure, lighting control and automation, as well as access control and IP security systems. We've adapted our company to be ready for the ever-changing technological landscape. We at Advanced Sound Company are proud members of the National Electrical Contractors Association, where most recently our work at Molloy College's Barbara H. Hagan Center for Nursing Excellence was recognized as a 2017 NECA Project Excellence Award winner. NECA is the nationally recognized voice of the $171 billion electrical construction industry that brings power, light, and communication technology to buildings and communities across the United States. Many of NECA's 4,000 member companies compete within the federal procurement market and recognize its unique opportunities. Risk is inherent when competing in the federal marketplace, and although the federal marketplace is notorious for limiting it, that key to success is cash flow. That said, there are 3 concepts related to cash flow that I believe this committee has the ability to alter for the better. 2 years ago, NECA contractor Mr. Greg Long of Long Electric testified before the House Small Business Committee, describing one of the biggest issues facing our contractors, the prompt payment and proper administration of change orders. Mr. Long's commentary, along with the hard work of this committee, led to the passage of the Change Order Transparency for Federal Contractors Act, H.R. 4754, which requires federal agencies to list their practice on payments of change orders and their history for doing so. While this legislation allowed for the protection of contractors on the front end by increasing awareness, the crux of the problem remained unaddressed, that being the need for prompt payment on these changes. Thankfully, through the leadership of Representatives Stauber, and Vesey, this committee has recognized the issues and understands that requiring partial payment for unilaterally requested change orders is a major step towards alleviating the unnecessary risk of many small construction contractors assume as doing the cost of business with the federal government. H.R. 2344, the Small Business Payment for Performance Act, is a common-sense solution requiring the federal government to recognize that their delayed payments have real-world consequences for America's small businesses. Secondly, on construction industry contracts, the federal government has the ability to hold up to 10% of the contract price until satisfactory completion of the work. This process is known as retainage, and while it was originally intended to assure the prompt completion of work, while not all federal contracts require the use of retainage, this practice has caused many subcontractors to be wary of working with the federal government. Retainage sums are often passed down, inevitably laying upon some subcontractors to cover the costs. Because of this, many states have either done away with retainage on their projects or have lowered their overall percentage. One immediate way to mitigate the degree of financial exposure from retainage is for the federal government to follow the states and lower the overall rate. This would put more liquidated funds in the pockets of America's small business and likely decrease the overall cost of federal construction projects. Lastly, as methods for delivering larger infrastructure projects continue to develop and become more complex, surety bonding must remain an underlying assurance for contractors. The federal government for decades has provided protections not only for itself, but for the small businesses and their workers who interact with it through the use of bonding. With the increased use of public-private partnerships, or P3s, on federal property, the need to reform the 1934 Miller Act to unambiguously cover these types of contracts is apparent. In conclusion, as a contractor, I've worked on numerous construction projects, and I'm extremely encouraged by this committee. Thank you again for this opportunity. NECA and Advance Sound applaud the committee's unwavering support of small business.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, Ms. Callahan will recognize you for 5 minutes.
Chair Golden, Ranking Member Stauber, and members of the subcommittee, my name is Dorothy Callahan, and I am the president of D. Callahan LLC, as well as a member of the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce's GovConnect Council. Thank you for inviting me to testify today. A little background on why I am testifying on this topic. I've spent my career working at large prime contractors as a small business program manager and strategic partnership director. In these roles, I have been responsible for many aspects of successfully working with small businesses. This includes fostering strategic relationships with internal program deal teams and potential partners, mentoring small business for success in the public sector, and identifying partnerships to fill key capability gaps while ensuring customer and mission success, just to name a few. I have also worked with small businesses at trade shows and other conferences to promote and identify teaming partners during my tenure at these large firms. My past positions give me a unique perspective, understanding the needs and challenges of both prime and small business contractors in the federal marketplace. Based on my experience, I would like to make recommendations to the committee about changes that could be made to allow small business contractors to be more successful in the acquisition landscape. One of my many roles was to plan, organize, and coordinate the small business program, as well as make recommendations for input to the corporate strategic approach that would maximize corporate resources to enhance program efficiency and effectiveness. I also assisted our Small Business Liaison Office, subcontract and program directors with the facilitation of small business goals and accomplishments. Therefore, I spent many years facilitating and managing subcontracting plans, which includes being an advocate for our teaming partners internally. This gave me unparalleled insight into issues with these plans faced by both primes and small businesses. One of the changes that I believe would improve subcontracting for small businesses is to require the identification of small businesses listed in subcontracting plans. If the prime wins the contract with a small business listed on their team, that business should be utilized. This change would allow contracting officers to be to more successfully evaluate a prime's progress on meeting their subcontracting plan goals. Another role I had was coordinating and managing all corporate activities during the federal compliance reviews by supporting audits by the Defense Contract Management Agency, resulting in the achievement of an exceptional rating for my company. An annual past performance evaluation is required for primes, as well as interim evaluations at least every 12 months throughout the entire period of performance of the contract. Since this annual evaluation is already required, I recommend it include an assessment of the prime's subcontracting plan. This additional component of the evaluation would achieve two effects: allow oversight by contracting officers without added additional burden, and provide an opportunity for prime contractors to discuss their progress on meeting subcontracting goals. When a prime contractor sets a subcontracting goal, they are required to show a good faith effort to meet it. The definition of this effort is ambiguous and can be interpreted loosely, much to the detriment of small businesses. Not all, but some large companies take advantage of this unspecified term, which leads to more of checking the box instead of working towards meeting the goals in their subcontracting plans. This broad definition does not hold primes accountable for utilizing small businesses. Therefore, I support the committee's proposal that the good faith standard should be removed and instead primes should be assessed on a pass-fail basis. However, it is important that in this change, the fail rating is explicitly defined to avoid any confusion or ambiguity if a prime were to receive this rating. Prime should also have the ability in this new system to resolve this issue with the contracting officer, since there are instances where meeting the goals is not possible. In my role as the central liaison with the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, or OSTBU offices, I have seen their effectiveness firsthand. OSTBUs are incredible resources within agencies that advocate for small business contractors. They should be empowered to be utilized as an additional resource to contracting officers to assist in subcontracting plan compliance and remediation. In summary, I have dedicated my career to developing strong relationships with small businesses in all socioeconomic categories to assist in strategic preparation for pursuit of opportunities and partnerships within the federal market. I believe the meaningful policy changes outlined in this testimony will lead to increased utilization of small businesses in the federal marketplace. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. This concludes my testimony, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We're going to now go to member questions. And with that, I would recognize myself for the first 5 minutes, and I'm going to start with Ms. Guadarrama. You talked a little bit about 809 panel recommendations, and you suggested that we should look into a sense of Congress rejecting that panel's recommendations. And as far as we know, there's not been a legislative effort underway to implement these proposals. And so what is it about the 809 panel proposals that are so concerning to the small business community that would require the committee to look into addressing this preemptively through action on the House floor?
Well, my concern is the mere thought that the 809 panel is going to be making a recommendation that could have such a far-reaching effect on small businesses. The SBA just recently came out with 6 years of hitting the small business goal. And if you have a program that for the last 6 years has hit the goal, it doesn't make any sense to look at it now and say, let's see how we can change the program. If you look at HubZone that is set up with a 10% preference, that goal is never reached. So you have a program in place where the goal is being reached, and then you have a recommendation from the 809 panel saying, let's move it into the type of program that HubZone currently has where it's not being reached. Makes absolutely no sense. And if anything, I think it would be extremely devastating for the small business community who has for years now specifically been working under small business set-asides.
Thank you, ma'am, very much. You also talked about making some changes similar to what was done with the Runway Extension Act, and I want to point out that through work we did on this subcommittee. A bill just yesterday passed the House floor that was sponsored by the ranking member here to try and make the SBA follow through with the changes of the Runway Extension Act, and I'm sure we're going to be able to get that done. So thanks for that, Pete, and congrats on getting that through the House. But you've talked about following through with changes that aren't based upon just the receipts, but rather the size of an employee, the employee-based standard. Could you talk a little bit about why you think we should look into looking at the average employees of the preceding years as a change that might be helpful?
I think for the same reason that the changes were made on the revenue-based side of it, I think when you're looking at small businesses, as they get close to the point where they're going to be outgrowing the small business size standard, for any small business, the idea that they could have a little bit extra time to actually get ready to make that shift from small to other than small, a 3-year averaging would be very beneficial for them. It would give them a little more time to actually see what they need to do, whether it's increasing staff, changing the business model somewhat, and a 3-year averaging, I think, would be enough time for the small business to become more viable under full and open competition, and at the same time is not a long enough time period that it would be detrimental to the small businesses that are still within the program.
Thank you. So a bit of an incentive to grow, but also protecting jobs.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Just moving on with what time I have left, Mr. Lansdowne, I wanted to talk a little bit about subcontracting plans. You talked about putting on the scorecard for SBA about the subcontracting dollars on their annual scorecard. Why do you think that is a meaningful change since they're already reporting percentages? What is it about reporting the actual amount of dollars that you think would be important?
Sure. I brought a copy of the report, actually, the scorecard. When you look at those percentages, you sometimes have trouble putting in relativity as to percentages of what. And the chamber recommended that we show the actual dollars so it can be more real for subcontractors, for the general public who has access to those scorecards. So it just would make it more clear as to really how many dollars are being spent in the subcontracting arena.
Okay, and very, very quickly, just moving on. This is something that came up in full committee last week, and Ms. Callahan spoke about it too, so I'm going to ask this question, and then my time will be expired, but if you take your time to answer it. You talked about in your testimony how you worked with a prime contractor to be a part of their bidding process. They win the bid, and then you don't get the opportunity to work on the contract itself. I think this is a big problem, and I've heard it's one that happens frequently. So could you talk more about your recommendation to empower the DPUs to monitor subcontracting compliance in order to help with this issue?
Absolutely. When that happened to my company, I picked up the phone and called the small business director as a subcontractor. It didn't have a lot of weight because I wasn't a government person to talk gov to gov with the small business director. She mentioned that she would write policy, and that wouldn't help us. It was too late at that time. You know, it was all over with. So empowering the OSBU to be an advocate for the small business, to work alongside the contracting officer, because as I've heard across with my colleagues, they're overburdened with work, they're trying to get the contracts awarded, et cetera, et cetera. So having them alongside to help with compliance, to help with remediation of activities that go on with the small subcontractors that are having trouble being recognized and utilized on the prime contracts.
Thank you for that response. I imagine you put some time into helping develop your portion of that bid, and so then lost out on some man hours put in. Yeah, it's disappointing, big loss. So I'm out of time by over a minute, so I apologize for that, and I'd go ahead and recognize the ranking member, Mr. Stauber, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. DePace, you said something that I wrote down, and it resonates with me, being a small business owner for almost 30 years. And it was this: delayed payments have real-world consequences for small businesses. That is a statement that government should understand. that we cannot allow this to be put on the backs of our small businesses. So thank you for that. Ms. Callahan, you have a ton of experience, and I'm looking forward to you answering some of the questions here. What are some of the reasons, justified or not, that a prime might not use a small subcontractor they worked with in submitting the proposal?
So there could be that as the when the award has been made, if something should change within that award, then the skill sets or the capabilities that that company initially brought to the proposal may not now fit into that change within the actual contract award.
Due to like a change order?
It could be, right. So that would be one reason that one would not be utilized.
From your experience, is that the most common?
Especially at an IDIQ level, which is your, and then you have task orders underneath it. When you build your team for an IDIQ, you're building it on the requirements of that solicitation. But then there are specific, work orders, task orders that might come out. And not every company is going to fit each task order. So that could warrant.
In your experience, how do primes define good faith?
What I've seen is kind of how many outreach events have I attended, how many companies have I talked to, instead of really looking at what efforts have you taken to kind of bring that team on, maybe to mentor them, to help them along to build their capabilities.
Mr. Lansdowne, you had talked about the ability to work with the prime and ultimately not getting the contract. Can you tell us the financial burden that put on your company? What was the cost for that?
It was a little while ago, but we were truly a startup, and those dollars were very important to our corporation. So as a small corporation, it was a couple $1 million impact.
I can't imagine that, having the ability to put forth the effort and then losing it like that. So I think the goal for us is, we have the witnesses here. Your experience is valuable in how we proceed with our legislation. But from this member's standpoint, there is nothing more important than protecting and serving our small businesses across this nation and giving them the opportunity to be awarded contracts as a prime and or a subcontractor. And so the goal is to make sure that you're represented, and you all bring a wealth of experience to us. So from our standpoint, I want to say thank you for your testimony. I wrote a lot of notes here. The whole goal is to make sure that our small businesses, which the four of you know are the engine of our economy, the engine of our economy has to be protected, and you're going to bring that experience and help us legislate in the best way we can as we go forward. So I want to thank you all for your testimony and shared experiences. Thank you. And I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Gentleman yields back, and we'll now recognize Congressman Troy Balderson. He's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Innovation and Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone on the panel. And my question is for response from the whole panel. Each of you advocated for the importance of supporting small businesses and these businesses face when they're working as or with the federal contractor. The federal acquisition regulations are the principal set of rules governing the government's purchasing process. The system was created to ensure uniform policies and procedures for acquisition. In addition, FAR are set in place to determine whether or not the prime contractor made a good faith effort to meet its subcontracting goals. How would each of you alter FAR so that small businesses could better benefit from partnering with federal government? from the whole panel, please.
If I could address that, I think both Mr. Lansdowne and Ms. Callahan brought up very serious concerns about the fact that you have small businesses that are initially included with subcontracting plans, and in the end, they're not actually used with it. I think the proposal that Ms. Callahan came up with, which was to include, when you're looking at evaluation, whether or not they've actually hit the goals that are out there. Good faith effort, I think you can probably have 200 different small businesses in here, and we'll all say, yes, we've all had the benefit of being part of a good faith effort. We've gone to the trade fairs, we've met with the individuals. That generally has very little to do with actually having an opportunity to work with the prime. So if something were actually in place to gauge in terms of the dollars that they're working with, it would make much more sense than simply looking at if they've made a good faith effort. In addition to that, what Mr. Lansdowne had also spoken about in terms of being included initially with it. In my case, I was working with a contractor who was bidding at a NASA location. I had a very good reputation out there. They asked me to go out there and help them actually make the presentation, which I did. Then once they did receive the contract, they decided that there was another company that could probably do it at a lower price point than I could work with. I think that happens very routinely to lots of small businesses. And again, if there were a way to monitor the individuals that were actually included, the companies included on the small business plan originally when it's submitted, and to then actually see what is the progress that's being made in working with those specific companies, it would make a huge difference.
I'd like to just add to that, because the subcontracting plan is part of your contract, resilient contract, and I think often it's overlooked in the CPARS, which is the Contractor Performance Assessment Report. There is an item that asks about small business subcontracting. So if you really want to kind of put some teeth into this, make sure that, there's that looking at the subcontracting plan. I think today it's these contracting officers may not, I'm not going to say they're not, some may be, others are not, looking at that subcontracting plan and its compliance to the subcontracting plan.
Yeah, I think that, like we've all said, being able to work on countless projects, we've all spent thousands and thousands of dollars bidding on projects. Maybe my company does 100 projects a year, and we bid on 5,000 or 6,000. Being named as a subcontractor from the start would be an advantage. That would give us an opportunity to work with these things, making sure that those commitments are met. We've all gone to various large contractors meetings. We've been invited on projects, and then all of a sudden somebody comes in and said, "I've done this here," or I can do this here, and it really limits our ability, locally to support local labor. It limits our ability to continue to grow in the marketplace, and somebody is just taking the scope and the specification documents that we've, pined over for a long period of time and just put a number to it, and it's quite disheartening sometimes.
And lastly, I would agree with all my colleagues here. Being recognized specifically by company name is very, very important. Instead of checking a box for 8A or checking a box for one of the socio-economic programs would be very, very helpful. One of the experiences that we had was after the award of the contract, we were then asked for a best and final offer after the government award. And to your point, there's no way you can, what do you say? Who do you say it to? As a subcontractor, you don't exist pretty much in the eyes of the government, because the actual, contractually, it's with the prime contractor. So to put some teeth in the Act to list the contractor by name, back to empowering the OSDBU to be able to not take over contracting officer role, but certainly work alongside because they're overburdened. I'll say that again, they probably applaud here to hear me say that today, to help them to monitor and to empower them to take action when these things aren't being met.
Thank you all very much.
Gentleman yields back, and I'm going to do a second round of questions. I know that Mr. Stauber would like to as well. Ms. Guadarrama, I wanted to ask you, you were just describing, let's throw out some hypothetical numbers that might be small, but maybe people can wrap their minds around easily. If you as a subcontractor helped in a bid and maybe said you could do some work for $100,000, and then the prime uses those figures to put out like $1 million bid and wins the contract, and then they turn around and go with another subcontractor who says they'll do the work for $50,000. Does that save taxpayers $50,000, or is that just added profit for the prime?
I think it's actually just added profit for the prime. The dollar amount that was in the contract is still in the contract for the full
It's locked
amount.
in, yeah.
And if anything, the taxpayer is probably being shortchanged on the type of value that the original company that was added into the contract, the experience that they could bring, probably losing that.
Well, thank you. Probably a naive question. I just wanted to get that one on the record. Mr. DePace, I wanted to ask you a little bit. You were talking about the construction contracts and retainage. This sounds to me like some construction workers or even just other small subcontracting businesses sometimes being asked to work essentially for nothing, and that the retainage itself is greater than they might actually get out of the work at the end of the day. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of facets to that question. I mean, prompt payment is truly important, and by the time you're in the construction process and get a pencil requisition through, and then it's approved, and if the federal government is taking 150 days to pay, by the time that cycle starts, we're almost 6 months into the process. Retainage is even worse than that. Sometimes, as an infrastructure or a preliminary contractor, we could be working on large transportation projects where we're performing the work within the first 6 months of the period, and substantial completion or satisfactory completion of the work is not done for 36 months. So that 5 or 10% is held for that extended period of time.
Hard to make payment too, probably wages.
Yeah, I mean, it all trickles down, especially being a union workforce. We have to pay health and benefits. We can't, we have a $50,000 a week, salary that we need to constantly meet. We have manufacturers that we need to pay, and we have net 30 terms with them. It doesn't matter, when we get paid. So it causes all of us to have, large general operating accounts, and small businesses that don't understand that practice when working in the federal government do seem to fail because they don't understand the cash flow negativity.
Well, thank you for that and for taking care of your workers. Mr. Lansdowne, I wanted to ask you a question here. You have made us aware that the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce has a program called the Veteran Institute for Procurement. Can you tell us a little bit about the program and the benefit it provides?
Sure. It's a program for free, and yes, I said free. The expense for the actual participants on the service-disabled, veteran-owned, and veteran-owned small businesses, the only cost is the travel to and from there. There are 3 platforms by which they can get involved to get started, to grow, even to do business outside the United States, both federal and commercial. This offers for them the benefit of collaborating, because in small business, you feel like sometimes you're on an island by yourself. So it provides other business owners with that venue, helps them with processes internally to strengthen those processes, such as HR, accounting, all those kinds of things to help them move along. So through that program, which is a 3-day, 27-hour program certificate for the participants at the C-level, principal level, ownership level of those corporations. So it creates a great venue. Over 1,300 companies have graduated from the program, and it has caused some great results.
Great. Sounds like a very worthy program. Thank you for that. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the others who have questions. But I did want to note, Mr. DePace, on the issue of prompt payment, you made some reference to this. I know that a couple of our committee members here, including the ranking member, have done some good work on the National Defense Authorization Act that we just passed out of the House last week. So I'm sure maybe he'd like the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sitting here and listening to Mr. Lansdowne. You talk about the federal, after a prime has been awarded the contract, they come to the small business subcontractor and ask for their last best offer. I can't imagine that. I just, to me, it does not make sense. And as Ms. Guadarrama talked about, they have a subcontractor that is awarded the bid with the prime, and then they ask for the last best or bring another contractor in there, assuming they're going to be cheaper. And as you stated, ma'am, it's not. The contractor, the prime, still gets that. And I just only, from looking at this situation from out, it's outrageous. Like I said, as you talked about small businesses, that's part of keeping them sustainable. And for the federal government to not pay you for 150 days, and sometimes even longer because you missed checking a box or what have you, that's outrageous. It is such a privilege for me to serve to hear this, because we need to bring this back to Main Street America. It doesn't, fundamentally, it doesn't smell, doesn't look right for small businesses. And I tell you what, for me, we know we need changes. And I would ask that, and the ranking member and I are going to get together on this and make some changes. And the changes that we make don't have to take 5 or 10 years. This needs to be as immediate as possible to sustain our small businesses, to make sure, Mr. DePace, that your business stays intact, paying your employees a good wage. That's fundamentally important that we do that. And I'm convinced that the chair is with me on this, and we're going to look at taking some of your testimony and changing it. Because I don't like to have to wait for the pace of government. Because if you get outside this city, the pace of government is too slow. Let's use it at the pace of small business. Everyday men and women in small business. So that's what I want to do with you, Mr. Chair, to be able to take this and make a change to benefit and ensure that our small businesses remain a vital part of contracting. Thank you.
Well, amen to that. I'm with you. Rep. Balderson, did you want to ask any more questions?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Callahan, this would be directed to you. In your experience working with large prime contractors, do you think primes will support the solutions identified today, specifically eliminating the good faith standard?
I think that if they are the good players in this, they should have no issue with that. It's the bad players that will raise the flag, raise the issues. But I think in good players, not a problem.
Okay. And Mr. DePace, my question for you is there a reason why the Miller Act currently does not extend to the public-private partnership or P3s?
It's just very unambiguous in terms of surety bonding, and just like the question you asked Ms. Callahan, surety bonding really is a process that allows us to have a lowest responsible bidder, and I think all of us here at this table, fight the fact of something called, lowest bidder. By ensuring that P3s are surety bonded, it would allow a higher level of responsibility on those processes, and we want to take that ambiguity out of the Miller Act.
Thank you. I yield back my remaining time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I also wanted to ask Ms. Callahan, I think it's clear the ranking member is worked up about this. I think it's very, unfortunate that this is happening with the issue of subcontractors sometimes getting cut out. This came up, like I said earlier, in a full committee hearing just last week. But you did kind of talk a little bit about the issue of like a change package coming out. So what are some of the best practices on the front end that we might also look at, let's say in terms of good contracting, practices at SBA or in other federal agencies to try and make sure that those change packages don't have to occur as frequently. I mean, there must be a way to try and do this so that there's more certainty for a prime, so that they're not put into that position. I don't know if you don't have any recommendations, don't worry about it. But
and thinking about your question, when you're a large prime contractor, you're building a team of small businesses, and it's part of your response and the solicitation. So making and having the teaming agreements to really articulate what you're expecting from the partner. And then that company should be put in your subcontracting plan. You identify that company and the value they're bringing to the team, because they're helping you win. Because not they're bringing a special skill, niche to that team, filling in the gaps. So I think that is, an area that, really become focused on that. And who are those teaming partners? Looking at those solicitations and ensuring that there's compliance.
that's perfect. I mean, I think I just gave you an opportunity to talk a little bit about what the government can do on the front end, but I think you kind of went right to saying it's on the prime, and that we should be ensuring that subcontractors that work hard to be a part of the bid get an opportunity to be a part of the work, correct? All right. Well, I think we all agree on that. Do you have any more questions?
I will just reiterate, thanks for sharing your expertise today. And I'll reiterate this, that the ranking member and I have heard loud and clear from your experience on what we can do. And again, the pace of government isn't allowed with the ranking member here, or the chair and the ranking member. So I appreciate your time and your talents, and keep up the good work.
Well, with that, I want to thank all the witnesses for taking time out of your schedules to be with us today and sharing your thoughts. We know here that small businesses across the country provide quality performance, efficiency, and are constantly creating new products and services. That's why American taxpayers benefit when the federal government works and does business with small firms. And I want to thank the witnesses for their testimony. Your suggestions are going to help us develop policies that will make it easier, not harder, for small businesses to get the contracting opportunities that we want them to. And I look forward to working with Congressman Stauber on that. I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record. Without objection, so ordered. And if there's no further business to come before the committee, we're adjourned. And thank you all very much.